The Visit is the 5th episode of the 3rd season of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is directed by Richard Marion, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And I don't mind this episode, there are definitely some really, really great moments and I will highlight those as we go through it, but I'm not a huge fan of Lois as a character. And that means that whenever she's in it, I don't particularly love it, and she's in it pretty much the entire way through. So definitely some great moments, but it's never going to be a favourite. It starts off with the kids dressed as sailors for some reason, and we establish that Debra's mother, Lois, is coming over, and Ray is not looking forward to it. Debra points out that Ray never calls Lois by her name, but to be fair, Ray never calls anybody by their name, and she suggests maybe calling her Mom. And Ray says Mom a few times, and then, as if by magic, Marie appears, which was quite delightful. We then cut to the next scene, and the kids are with Debra, Ray, and Lois. They've come back from the park, and Debra's washing everybody's hands. Lois goes to freshen up, and she doesn't want to use the towel because it's not a guest towel. Does she never go to the bathroom in anybody else's house? And we find out that she spent the entire time at the park sitting on a bench doing a crossword, and then she goes to take a nap. And Debra, and I don't like this, I love Debra, but Debra instantly blamed Ray. She said that she was taking a nap because Ray doesn't make her feel like part of the family. Well, clearly Lois hasn't made any effort whatsoever, so I didn't like that Debra was blaming Ray at all. But I think maybe deep down she doesn't blame Ray. I think she needs to blame somebody, and she doesn't want to blame her mother. She doesn't want to admit, at this point in the episode at least, that her mother is not making the effort. So she blames Ray instead, which is not great. We then have the dinner scene. Debra asks Lois to help Geoffrey cut up his food, and Lois doesn't really know what to do, so Ray ends up going to do it. And then we have this rather creepy moment, actually, where they look over and Marie and Frank are in the window, which I thought was pretty funny. And they've come over with a cake, and then Robert comes over because he smelled cake and then realised there wasn't any cake, so obviously the cake must be on its way to Raymond's, which did make me laugh. I did enjoy that moment. In fact, for me, most of the comedy in this episode and the moments that I loved all revolved, pretty much all of them, revolved around Marie and Frank and a little bit of Robert. And obviously, Debra's not happy that they're trying to have cake before they've finished dinner, and then Lois gets a call from Warren, and Debra overhears Lois saying that maybe she should just go and stay in a hotel, which is, again, not really something that is the right attitude. I say this as somebody who actually prefers to stay in hotels rather than people's houses, but it must be quite rude if you're going to stay in somebody's house, and then once you've arrived, you establish that actually it's not good enough for you, which is clearly what Lois was thinking, and she didn't want to be involved in it. But Debra is still not willing to admit that that's what's going on, at least not immediately. But then she sees Marie helping the kids, not being asked to help the kids. Marie dove in immediately, helped the kids cut up their food, and then Lois reveals that she wants to go to an exhibit the next day, and Debra realises that that's an activity she probably couldn't take the children to, and Lois just doesn't seem to get it. Marie kindly offers to look after the kids, then Lois says, well, she can just go to the exhibit on her own, and Debra has had enough, and she can no longer hide the truth. She blurts out that it's clear that Lois doesn't really care about Debra or the kids, and she hasn't even asked Ray a single question about his job. And I'm so glad she admitted that, because Debra was blaming Ray for everything, but it's clear that Lois hadn't made any effort with Ray either. And then we have one of the best moments ever. When Lois asks Debra what it is she's getting at, what is it she wants, Debra says, I want you to be more like her. And Marie's face in that moment was amazing. And the camera allows us to look at everybody's response to this, and everybody is so baffled that Debra has just said she wished her own mother was more like Marie. And it's amazing. It's an absolutely fantastic moment, and I really, really loved it. Marie then goes upstairs to see Debra when she's in the bedroom, and she tells Debra, I love you so very much, which is lovely. But then in true Marie style, she says, you can't talk to your mother like that, which is definitely very in keeping with Marie's character. And it's a really lovely bonding moment. And Marie says to Debra, she's not the kind of mother we are. Now, Debra probably doesn't love the fact that Marie is saying that she's got a similar mothering technique as Marie does, but I think as a viewer, it's clear to see that actually that is the case. Because Debra's own mother is not very motherly. She's not very maternal. And Marie very much is. That's very much who Marie is. And maybe Debra learned that from Marie. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's a combination of the two. But I thought it was a really lovely moment. And then Debra goes and apologises to her mother for snapping. Lois points out that Debra is a great mother, which I think is something Debra really needed to hear from her own mother. And then the final scene, we end with Marie phoning her house because the guys are over there and they're just shoveling that cake in as quickly as they can. And then Marie says, I'm coming over there. And Robert is the last one to leave the kitchen. And unfortunately, he slips. Ray and Frank are hiding from Marie. Robert is on the floor and Marie walks in and her facial expression is just absolutely fantastic. So a really fun way to end things. I don't like Lois as a character. I don't hate her necessarily, I just don't care for her. But there were so many great moments in this episode that I still ultimately really enjoyed it. I think Marie in particular brought something brilliant to this. It's also always nice when we have a chance for Debra to acknowledge what Marie does for her and for the family, because obviously, and understandably, Debra complains a lot about Marie. Marie has a lot of issues with personal space and giving backhanded compliments and saying things when she shouldn't. But at the same time, as we see here, she actually brings a lot of value and she is a wonderful grandmother. And I think it's really nice for Debra to actually acknowledge that every now and then. And clearly Marie really appreciated it being acknowledged as well. And that's not to say there's necessarily anything wrong with Lois's approach at being a grandmother. But that being said, I don't think she really does anything to approach being a grandmother. As long as she loves the children and doesn't treat them badly, that's fine. But I feel like that's an entry level for expectations. And clearly, Debra was hoping that her mother would build up a stronger connection with the kids and be more hands-on. Maybe if she was around more, maybe if she lived across the street, that's what would happen. But that's not what is happening here. And honestly, I think if she did live across the street, Debra would probably not love it. And I think that's probably the point Debra's trying to make. That Lois sees the kids so infrequently that she doesn't understand why she wouldn't become so hands-on and want to get involved with the kids because she doesn't see them that often. So I think Debra had a lot of valid points here, but the biggest takeaway for me is just the way she praised Marie for what she did, and I think that that's brilliant. So a great episode. I don't love Lois, but even with that in mind, I think the visit definitely has some pretty enjoyable moments.